On this week's Welcome to the Convo, we have a very special guest. I could say definitely most athletic person ever to be on this podcast so far. To bring us into the NCAA tournament opening up this week, we have the University of Arizona former basketball star, Arizona Ring of Honor inductee, Ernie McCray. Thank you so much for coming on with us.
Oh, it is my pleasure.
Yes, first to get all started for anyone who doesn't know you, you started playing basketball in Arizona, and can you tell us like how you got started playing basketball?
Well, I grew up in Arizona, by the way, in Tucson, where the university is. And I'm a jock. I've played all kind of sports. But I think basketball was the last sport that I took up as a child. I didn't play basketball until about the fourth grade. And it was I always liked the sound of it, the ball pounding. We didn't have a gym, but out on the asphalt playground at my school, and I liked all the squeaking of shoes, and it's a sport that just really suited me, and I had no idea that someday I would play at the University of Arizona. And that alone was an honor because I growing up in the town, and I was a fan uh, at my mother's breast. She used to listen to Arizona Wildcat games on the radio, before I knew what a basketball was. She was a big sports fan, and that was pretty much the start for me.
So basically, you were like surrounded by basketball, and it was like, would you say you were pushed to play basketball, or it just kind of like came to you in a way?
Oh, it just came to me. I've never been pushed to do anything. I've been pretty fortunate in my life. I've done exactly pretty much what I've wanted to do. I knew I was going to be a teacher. I was an educator here in San Diego, and a principal and teacher and all that. And I knew after my first day of kindergarten that I was going to teach, because I remember being all excited about going to school. It's going to be fun and all that. It happened to be a Catholic school. And after that first day, I remember going to the school with my friends, and some of them were crying on the way home. Already at the first day of school, some of them already been labeled, incorrigible, and you know what schools can do to people sometime. I could already read when I got there, so I guess I was spared a little of that kind of, negative thing. But I remember thinking, as much as you could think as a 5-year-old, that you know, that something could have been done different.
Mm-hmm.
They could have been more friendly. The principal of the school, I'm going to mention her name, Sister Mary Benedict, was just a horrible human being. I liked my teachers, but she was just brutal. Just if you went on the girls' side of the playground, you'd get whacked. And it was crazy. And so all through my schooling, I would kind of analyze lessons that teachers had thrown out on us. I'd go, wow, that was pretty interesting, but what if the teacher had done this? That could have made it fun and stuff. And that was pretty much what I did as an educator, made learning fun. Kids like being in my classroom and being at my school.
That's so interesting because I feel like every kid when they're in school, we're all like, oh, I wish the teacher would do this. I wish the teacher would do that. But I feel like a lot of people are afraid to go into teaching because of the various reasons. Like, I don't like kids, or I'm afraid of the work pay. But to know that, you actually did that and you stepped forward even when, you know, you had basketball there as something you were good at. It's why, I wanted to have you up here as you got inducted into the Arizona Ring of Honor. But let's go back to your time in Arizona. And, you were a 2-time Arizona State champion. I feel like that is very uncommon for people to kind of like, you don't really talk about that. And could you tell us about, your time playing in high school at Tucson?
Well, I never won a championship. In high school. We came in second in the state each year. I went to Tucson High, and we played a team from Phoenix Union, which we were good, but they were we couldn't have beaten them on our best day, and their worst day. Every person, as I remember it, every person on that team, the starters and a couple of people who came off the bench went on and played at the next level. That was how good they were.
Wow.
And it was embarrassing playing them for the state championship.
You're like, oh no, why those guys? Like, we couldn't get anybody else to even have like a shot.
Yeah, it was something. And one of the guys went on to, Albert Neely went on to play at Arizona State. So we kept the competition going, but my team never beat Arizona State either. But Albert and I were good friends. He was he helped me more than anything develop my game, because playing after high school, I would just think about things he would do on a court. And I did things similar, but at that stage of my game, I'd say he was better. And so we had similar styles, so I kind of copied a lot from him. And although we never beat him on the court, we had some great individual battles, and both of us got drafted by the Cincinnati Royals. Neither one of us made the team, but it was fun going into camp with him.
So would you say he was like an inspiration as you went on to play outside of high school and at your time in Arizona?
Yeah, he was. Most of my heroes, well, I've had heroes, like movie stars and sports stars like everybody else, but most of my heroes in life have been like about my age, kids that I thought had something that I really wanted. I remember, and this Matt Wilson was about 4 years older than me. He played freshman ball at the University of Arizona, but then quit school. He had something about him, and he was always a hero of mine, the way he carried himself. And he would always help me talk to girls, that kind of thing. I wasn't shy, but I wasn't that forward either, and he would always say, man, you just got to go. If you like her, just go up there and tell her. I said, I can't do that. And then he'd say, hey, my friend here really likes you, and I go, man, come on, and then then I start a conversation.
Did any of them work out?
Yeah. A little small, all that little puppy love you go through it.
It worked out in the end. That's all that matters,
Yeah.
So you didn't have a lot of interest in high school, but when I saw this story about how you got to the University of Arizona. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it was interesting that there I was in town and they didn't pursue me. And there's a long story behind that. The university wasn't that interested in Black athletes at that point. And I think that Coach Inc., and I'm not trying to badmouth him, but I think he really would have liked to have gotten somebody like Neely and a couple of other guys on that Phoenix Union team. So he didn't pay any attention to me. But after the Arizona high school all-star games, which I played in at Northern Arizona University, when I came back home, I was playing ball at the Y and ran into Alan Stanton, who'd been a football player and a basketball player at the University of Arizona. And we started talking, and he was saying, where are you going to school? I said, I don't know, maybe Eastern Arizona Junior College or someplace like that. He said, you mean you're not going to Arizona? Fred Inc. hasn't talked to you? I said, no. And he was a freshman basketball coach. In those days, you couldn't play varsity your freshman year. You had to play on the freshman team. And next day I had a scholarship. So he was a dear friend of mine for a lot of years. He just died recently, and I didn't hear about it until after he had passed and after the services. But he was the one he was the best coach I ever played for. Also, he was fiery, and in practices when he didn't like what we were doing, he'd get out there and illustrate what he wanted. I want you to guard like this, and then he'd say, okay, try to dribble past me, and he was a hustler, and he'd knock you around and stuff, and if he thought we weren't hustling, we'd have to run around the court about 10 or 15 times, and then come back into the practice. On rebounds, uh, he didn't like people just sitting back when the ball went up on the board, thinking, oh, well, Joe will get it, or, John will get it. We all had to yell, mine, when the ball went up and go after it. He was a great guy.
I feel like that's something that you don't really see a lot now in basketball today, is that a lot of athletes, especially in men's basketball, they don't talk as much. Like if you ever look at a women's game now, you see them talking constantly. One, because they don't have a lot of fans, so the people on the sidelines have to cheer them on, but they don't do the small things. Which I played basketball for a very limited amount of time compared to
Right.
you, but I feel like that's something our coaches always told us, is that you have to talk to each other. We're on a team, but for the team to work, you have to communicate. And I feel like a lot of people don't communicate as much. I don't know if you still watch basketball as much now, but would you agree? Or
Kind of agree with that. We're not in a lot of ways, in my opinion, we're not a very communicative society. We hold things in, especially men. You know, it's becoming better, but I grew up with that whole thing. Men aren't supposed to cry and all that kind of stuff. Like we aren't supposed to feel pain, and that's just a ridiculous thought. I've always been able to cry freely. I mean, if something bothered me and I felt like crying, I would try to hold it back. I mean, because I grew up in society. But if the tears had to come, then I would just let them come. It kind of frees you up for things, and communicating and talking is how we better ourselves as human beings, no matter what it is we're doing. In our jobs, if we talk to the people we work with, and in our neighborhoods, if we talk with our neighbors, uh, the world become just a little bit better. And that's a theme of mine, making the world better. I've spent a lifetime trying to make the world a little bit better than I found it when I got here in 1938. It's not too hard making it better than it was then, especially race wise, And when I was growing up in Tucson, it was Jim Crow, but it wasn't like in the South, like North Carolina and places like that. Uh, you know, I never remember feeling like, wow, if I disrespect a white person, I might be hanging from a tree and stuff. It was nothing like that. And and if you were mad, you could curse a white person out, which you couldn't do in the South. I traveled a lot in the South with my mother in the summers, and I remember we'd visit our relatives in Union, Mississippi, and man, I remember at the train station or the bus station, you get off and you just, you stayed clear of white people, and didn't look them in the face, and couldn't pass them on the sidewalk and all that kind of stuff. Arizona wasn't like that, thank goodness, because I don't know if I would have made it. I don't know we'd be having this interview if it had been like the South, because I'm not a violent person, but I didn't take a lot of crap either.
so you weren't shy, but you were like, I'm gonna stand my ground. Like, you're not gonna just push over me.
Oh no, no. And I've never wanted to be anonymous. I'm a show off, but not, the life of the party kind of show off.
Mhm.
Sports. That's one thing I like about sports. And I'm also an actor, and done things on stage, and a poet. You can show off your skills, rather than being, braggadocio and like I'm all this and all that. And that's what sports have done. Allowed me. I refuse to be anonymous on this planet. I always wanted to make a contribution to my town, and in Tucson, to get over the Jim Crow, it, sports helped a lot. I was well known and I was respected. Still had to be in my place, kind of, but being a basketball star, if you want to go there, allows you, some kind of privileges that you don't usually get. Like in high school, I would get invited to some of the rich white kids' parties and stuff, which ticked off a lot of my black friends. Oh, you think he's something? You go to the party. I say, you know me. If I get invited to a party, I'm there. You know. But that kind of opened up. You know, I lived in this little old house. I loved my home and stuff, and I thought it was big. You know, until I went to some of these rich kids' house and they had 2 and 3 bathrooms and stuff. Some of them had a swimming pool, and a couple had maids and stuff, and you just looking at this other way of
World.
life, and they were just so natural with it, you know, like. Then I'd go home to my little old house. You know? Wow.
Yeah, like, I can't believe that's like how other people live. I feel like that's very common to see today, especially, we live in the age of the internet and the social media and stuff like that. But to see that, sports kind of helped you be yourself and be in the way, is that kind of what you feel like you wanted to give to your students when you're an educator?
Oh yeah. My my being an educator was totally child oriented, student oriented. I have a lot of respect for kids. I enjoyed being one, and so I remember when I first started teaching in San Diego. A lot of the teachers, you know, who had been teaching for a while, they say things. Okay, on the first day of school, you know, when you're bringing the kids into the room, you don't want to smile and anything. You know, you don't want them like to think you. I could. I was, for one thing, I was smiling because I had me a job. You know, what I mean, first thing the kids saw on my face was a smile. You know, kids, people have funny ideas about kids. You know, and I was fortunate. I grew up in a house that I was I was respected by my mother. My dad didn't grow up in the house. They divorced when I was pretty young, but my mother always listened to me, asked my opinion about things. And when her friends came over, unless it was something they really needed to gossip about, didn't want me to hear, you know. But I but I wasn't raised like children are to be seen and not
Not
heard.
her.
My mother wanted me to. Matter of fact, that was my punishment. I didn't get many whippings. I can only remember being hit about 3 times. But sometimes I wish my mother would have whipped my butt, you know, because I noticed my friends that were getting whipped all the time. They do something bad and they think they're whipping, and then they would back out playing. I had to, if I did something stupid or, you know, or something I shouldn't have done, my mother would say, I, w- I want you to explain to me, you know, why you went up there. You know, Mrs. Warner loves you to death, and you go up there with your friends and you take all the peaches off her tree, and you know that woman would give you a peach if you just asked for it. I want you to explain to me, you know, why you did that. And I had to explain something in sentences, you know, and then after I do that, she'd say, okay, so what if the same thing happened the next time? What can you do differently? So I'm so glad I had that upbringing. But when you're growing up, you don't know how you're being raised. You know what I mean? You don't know the influences you have. And when I became a teacher and I've seen every kind of parent there is I remember just thinking, oh, I was so lucky to grow up in the house I grew up in, you know. No wonder this kid is so screwed up. Look at his mom. I mean, geez, I can't believe what she said, you know, that type of thing.
I one really appreciate how you are an educator, because I feel like people don't give educators enough credit. Like, it's the backbone of everyone's childhood. Everyone remembers like the one teacher that they had that they actually liked, even though they always bring up like the other eight they didn't like every time. So when you're at Arizona, did you did play in a time where basketball players, black and white, it's still friction, even though Arizona wasn't as bad as where I'm from, North Carolina. Did you feel like it was hard to like be friends with your teammates? Did you feel like it was hard to like get that team camaraderie because of it?
No, not at all. Um, and that's not to say that, you know, some of my, well, all my teammates were white in college. not to say that some of them didn't have, their, what are these terms we're using nowadays, implicit biases and stuff like that, but they were very, very cool with me. I don't ever remember once. I mean, sometimes we get into it on the floor, a little aggressive or something, come on, man, all that kind of stuff. But no N words, no referring to my color, and I didn't do that either. I felt a lot of respect from my teammates. Well, for one thing, I treat people with respect, and I found in my life, if you do that, that eliminates a lot of the problems. If you give people an opportunity to be themselves with you.
That's so nice to know that, because I feel like everyone, when they talk about, especially anything from back then, especially when it comes to sports, they automatically think, not saying everyone didn't have, the same experience you have, but they just automatically think, oh, it was awful and they didn't really have the opportunity to enjoy the sport. To know that it wasn't like that for everyone and people really did get the opportunity to enjoy their time in college is really nice to hear.
Well, I'm the type of person, I'm going to make fun out of it if I can. You know, I kind of got that from my grandfather. He was amazing. He came to live with my mother and me when from about the third grade, and he died when I was about a senior in high school. But he was uh, he was everybody's friend, and and sometimes I remember being so embarrassed just walking around town with him because he'd just see somebody he didn't know. Hey, and he'd tip his hat. I'm Charlie Chapman, and this is my grandson. Well, he was here a minute ago, because I'd be running over behind something, because he just starts talking. I say, Granddaddy, you talking to these people you don't even know him. He said, boy, you don't have to know people to talk to them. And he helped me with race relations tremendously. There were some times when the Jim Crow stuff got a little to me, and I'd come home. I hate white people, and I didn't really feel that way. But what else are you gonna say? When you've gone, you got your little quarter, and you go in that cafe that they've never served you a hamburger before, but as a kid, you're hopeful. This time I'm gonna go in there. I know they're gonna serve me that hamburger. And you go in there and they say, get your little butt out of here. And I'd go home and I'd say, my grandfather said, wait a minute, boy. He said, what about that man at Cut Rate's drugstore? You go in there to get a root beer float. He's always giving you extra ice cream. Does he treat you like you were treated today? No. And that dude at the Dairy Queen is always encouraging you guys to get good grades. Does he treat you the way you treat today? No. And that woman at the library who's always stopping people from reading and introducing you and telling everybody how smart you are, does she treat you that way? I'd say, no. He said, then you had a problem with a white person, not white people. And what a lesson. I mean, I think I would have learned that anyway, but isn't that what discrimination is about? One person of a race does something to you that you don't like, and then you just paint everybody that race like him, and I'm so glad that, and he that from he ran away from home. He grew up in a sharecropping plantation in Hawkinsville, Georgia. And when he was 14, he said, I didn't know what was out there in the world, but he said, I knew it had to be something better than what, experiences I was having. So he beat up the foreman of the plantation. And of course, after doing that, he doesn't know whether he killed him or not. He didn't have time to find out. He had to go, And then he just made it out of Hawkinsville and eventually sailed around the world. And he was telling me, he said, boy, there's two different kind of people in the world. People that maybe you could spend some time with and you get something from them, and people you need to just leave alone. He said, but it had nothing to do with color, because in traveling around the world, he found that all kinds of people. And when he was running away from the plantation, he would often need help from people in little towns, and sometimes, blacks people would help him. And then some would be scared because, something can happen to them helping him. And then he said he found that there were many white folks who said, look, we don't have much, but we'll share what little we got, and we'll look out for you and let you know when we think you can move on. So he learned some lessons, because he could have had all kind of hatred, for white people, because from the way he tells it, he said he just whomped that dude, the plantation boss. He pulled and snatched him off a horse,
Oh, wow.
just pounded him. And I'm sure it was a pounding, because my grandfather was, I'm looking at a picture of him and my grandmother now up against the wall. He was a strong dude.
That's a nice lesson. I feel like everyone who's listening to this or watching it could take on, is that, make the best out of any situation, because
Yeah,
one experience doesn't determine how every experience like that could turn out. Because I
that's
feel like
right.
that's something that stops people from trying new stuff or trying something again because they had a very bad experience first time.
And you learn from people. Like when I taught I guess it was about my second year of teaching when the Beatles came out. And at first, I wasn't interested in their music all that much. I want to hold your hand. I want to, that just, I mean, we soul, I mean, we had rhythm and blues and stuff. But my sixth grade girls, they just love the Beatles. So they turned me on to them, because I needed to respect what they like. I couldn't say, what do you like about them? But then when I started listening to them, and they were playing that music because that was the way they got started, playing for the teeny boppers. But then when they came out with songs like Michelle and Yesterday and Sergeant Pepper's, what is it? I can't think of the band, stuff like that. I was going, wow, these guys are interesting, And now Paul McCartney is, the ex-Beatles. I mean, he's a monster out there, he's still doing it. But I could have just carried my attitude, like, oh, no, I don't listen to that music. But out of respect for them, uh, I fell in love with a group of white singers.
In a time where that was not very common.
Really?
So, main reason I had you up here today was for your being inducted into the Ring of Honor. And I saw that you said it puts your life in a historical perspective. Could you talk to us about how that really made you feel when you saw that that was going to be something you were going to be inducted into?
Well, what it does to me, it honors me for more than my basketball wizardry, if you will. Uh, it kind of honors my whole life growing up around in Tucson, um, and it honors Black history, because I'm part of the Black history of in Tucson, um, and it's like, I mean, trying to think how I'm feeling about it, because it is such an honor. It it just kind of honors my struggles and what I contribute, because when I was doing my thing at the university, there were some high school kids coming up in town who were really good ballers, and they admired me. So to me, when I go in the Ring of Honor, I'm kind of representing them too. Um, and being the second Black ball player at the university, so all that's part of the history. And I was the first Black basketball player to graduate. So it's honoring all of my life. And like I said, I was an Arizona fan all my life. Um, I pretty much grew up on the campus. Um, my mother grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and then went to college at Howard and Washington, D.C. So she was a big city girl, and she ended up in Tucson for her health. And when she got there, before 1938, when I was born, I mean, I could just imagine her shock, leaving Howard and D.C. because she got TB right out of after she graduated. And, you know, but the university was 10 blocks from our house. So she would take me up there for forums and dance recitals and plays and games and all these kinds of things. So my being in the Ring of Honor is just kind of like a place I should be. And then again, this historical perspective is there's a thought I have in my mind, and it's not coming out. It'll come to me in a minute or two. But it's, there's just so much history involved in it that goes beyond basketball, if you will.
Basketball is, I like to say, people don't see the benefit of like sports. Like even though they could be dangerous and things, like that can be your stepping stone, and it could lead you to be in the Ring of Honor for a varied of other reasons and not just basketball. And to see that you kind of turn basketball into all these other things is very inspirational to see.
Right. There again, I don't know why every time I keep coming to the main point I want to make, I should have been, uh, here's a story. I should have been in the Ring of Honor. I should have been one of the first ones in there. And I'm not saying that out of, madness. And I was late being inducted into the Hall of Fame also. But I thought about it. The reason people kind of forget the history when they start these Hall of Fames, they're starting it because they're thinking about the great players who are there right now. They say, well, to start a Hall of Fame. And then they put whoever's great, at that period, they put
Mm-hmm.
them in there, and they should be too. But, if you're going to have something where you honor people, you have to go back some. There were a whole bunch of people that got up there before me. I mean, great ball players. So I'm not knocking them or maligning them, but I think our world now is honoring history more, especially Black history. With George Floyd's death. Now, before a lot of people were just shining our problems on. Oh, Black people always whining and carrying on and all that. And then it seemed like his death and the horrification of that woke people up, and they started thinking, wow. So we're thinking historically now, and that's going to better the world. Your generation, I have more hope now than I ever have for a better country, because you guys you're amazing. I like young people anyway, but it's, the people who are leading the Black Lives Matter and these things are just, and we got white allies, those women in Portland out there, they're marching in the street, getting arrested and stuff. That's new stuff. I mean, we've always had allies in our things, but just a few, the real left-wing type people, commies, and all these people, and now we just got regular people going, hey, something's wrong and we need to talk about it. And AOC, people like her, I just love that young woman. And Stacey Abrams, and just
Big Stacey Abrams fan.
we're just bringing you got a podcast, what I mean? Whoa.
Thank you. It's very inspirational, because not only, being Black, but being a female, it's hard to kind of say your piece and say your name and for people to help you. But like I said, it takes, they say it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to push a country, a cause, something forward, you know?
It does.
And, when I completely agree with you that when it comes to Hall of Fames or rings or just honoring anyone in general, people completely forget to look in the past. You can see that in however many Hall of Fames, from the NFL to the NBA to college basketball to even like now when a new athlete, a freshman or something comes up like a Cade Cunningham or a LaMelo Ball, and they like forget about people like Chris Paul or Carmelo Anthony that were doing the same thing, if not better, in their time, but they just kind of are zoned in on what's right in front of their faces.
That's right. And you mentioned LaMelo Ball. I don't get to see all the games, but wow, that dude can play some ball. I mean, the ball boys are. I love Lonzo's game, because he played at UCLA out here in Southern California. But LaMelo, man, that
Different.
dude, it was like, whoa. And the athletes, that they're again, the athletes are speaking up. LeBron James and these people, and they were wearing Black Lives Matters on their jerseys in the last NBA playoffs. That's all new stuff. That's good stuff. You guys are building a better world. Unfortunately, now it's going to take a little more work than necessary because of this past presidential administration and stuff, that this ridiculous madness that Trump has brought into our world, people storming the Capitol and all that. But underneath all that, I know here in San Diego, and I'm still an activist, and I'm seeing a lot of the young people, you guys got it.
I have no doubt. Every generation, every year, every day, it's one step closer to what it should be and what it will be
Mm.
someday.
Yep.
So I saw you have this single game record, 46-point game versus Cal State. Can you go back to that time and tell us, were you like, oh, like I'm going out, I'm having a game today, or was it like, just another day?
Well, I started off having a game today, you know, and it wasn't long that I was into it that I realized myself something is happening here. I couldn't miss. I remember one time I kind of tried to miss, not really, but I was driving for the basket or something, and I just threw it up there, and it went in. I went, whoa. And I didn't know that I had broken a record or anything like that. And after the game, what we didn't have these 13,000 people. I mean, my old gym wouldn't hold it, but we must have had 3,000 or 4,000 people there, and they just went crazy. And kids were wanting my autograph and stuff, and I just felt like, whoa. And of course, then I went home, and I just thinking, man, that was nice, got me a record and all that. But I didn't figure it to still be around now. And what it's done for me, it's kept my name among the good ball players at the university. I get mentioned with Steve Kerr and Andre Iguodala and Richard Jefferson and Luke Walton and all these guys, which is an honor to me. If it weren't for that record, hardly anybody would mention my name. And I remember regarding the Ring of Honor, I was watching a game that Bill Walton was announcing, and then he mentioned Ernie McCray, the great brother that. And are you familiar with Bill Walton? You know how he just.
I am a big Bill Walton fan. I'll say that. I was
Yeah,
watching an Arizona game, and that's kind of where I heard about you. And I was like,
yeah.
one, I love Bill Walton. He talks absolutely insane during his broadcast. I could not
Oh yeah.
imagine being his broadcast partner during a game. How
Oh
could he
yeah.
focus? How could you focus?
And he was just going on and on about me. And he's a friend of mine. Also, he's a San Diegan, and that was when it really sunk in. I was going, wow, because he's a sports hero of all times for me, because I saw him play high school ball, and I had never seen anybody like him at the high school level here at Helix High in San Diego. And I flew my mother out. I said, you got to see this kid play the big redheaded. I mean, woo, high school, he was like some giant playing against kindergartners or something. I mean, there was nothing they do. And then he went on to UCLA. If he hadn't had some of the injuries he had, there's no telling well, he's in the Hall of Fame and stuff. But, and he's a good guy. And he does. Sometimes when I watch the games, I'll mute the sound. Even though I love him, but sometimes it, I sometimes I wish he would say things within a little small period of time and then continue. But they're playing. You seeing this fast break, and he just talking about some song he heard on the
Yep.
radio. And then he's all over, I can't think of his name. His last name is Pash, one of the announcers. And he's always, they're always teasing each other. I kind of like that, but boy, he goes on. And he's the type of person, you either love him or hate him. And there's some people in Arizona on my Facebook thing, they just hate his guts. You know, why do they hire him? And I just figure, like, I don't want to ask for somebody's job. You know? How would you like to have a job and people just go around and do it? Oh, you're no good mopping. You know?
I always feel like that's strange when they say, "Oh, this announcer isn't that great," or "This coach isn't that great." Like, have you ever tried to announce a basketball game? Have you ever tried to
Really?
coach 7, 8, 17 to like 22-year-olds during a
Right.
pandemic? Like,
Yeah. People need to have more understanding and empathy for situations. Like Sean Miller, they couldn't have a better coach, but there are people that just hate him. And they'll equate him with Lute Olson, who was very much loved there, and he won a championship and stuff. And I've even made a comment, I think, on Facebook or somebody. I said, well, you talk about how great Lute Olson is, and then you expect somebody to come along and equal that? I mean, think about your logic, what you're thinking. But Sean just won 300 games at the university. He should be there. He's a teacher of kids with people. Oh, he hasn't taken us past the round 8 in the thing. Yeah, like it's so easy to get into those things. Like everybody's going to have a rough time. Like Duke, whoever would have known they'd have a season like they're having right now. In Kentucky, they having bad seasons. That's just part of life. It's not always winning and stuff. Especially in my case, I played on some of the worst Arizona basketball teams in the school's history. I mean, fortunately for me, I had some individual things, but our team record, and there was a reason for that. Our coach had been very successful, but he was coming at the end of an era, and the game was shifting. There were more jump. I was right after the generation of like 2-hand set shots and 1-hand set shots and all that kind of stuff, and then I was in the area of running and jumping and shooting and all that, and he just wasn't keeping up. And I couldn't have imagined him going into somebody's real great ball player's home and talking to their parents and then walking out of there with their kids to come to the University of Arizona. He had nothing to say. And there again, I'm not saying that to badmouth him so much, but just state the situation.
yeah.
And then Arizona ball was right after me, improved just a little bit. Then Fred Snowden, the first African American coach, I believe, at a Division I level came, and then he doesn't get enough credit. It's all Lute Olson and stuff, and Lute deserves all the the compliments he gets. But Fred got it going with Bob Elliott and Al Fleming, who's going in the ring honor with me, played in those days. And my mother was kind of like a team mom. She'd have guys over for dinner and stuff. She was big, huge fan. She played high school basketball. Of course, women's basketball then, I don't know if you about those old rules. They were weird.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
everybody could take a shot. I don't really know how it went. I can't believe that. Why can't everybody take a shot, or something different? I don't know what that was all about.
I remember it was maybe a few years ago, and I was like looking at all those rules, and I was like, I wish I could pay money to see how this worked, because I
Yeah.
think I'd look at it and be like, what is happening? I feel like we've been talking for a while now that your mom was a very big part of your life, and feel like she would be proud of you for what you've accomplished
Oh yeah.
throughout your time.
Oh, she didn't miss a thing I did, if it was in a play or with the school choir or some kind of political thing I was doing. She'd be so stoked. She'd just be she used to just jump up and down in the fan in the stands, and just I could hear her. You know how when you're playing, you hear things, but you don't hear things. You know, you hear the roar of the crowd, and you hear the cheering and all that, but you don't hear individual things. But I could hear her, you know, her voice, and she knew the game so well, which used to just really tick me off sometimes. You know, because you know what your brother telling you about, oh, what you do, you need to do this and that. But a lot of times I wouldn't give her the full respect for her advice, but when I heard something that I knew was true, I recorded it, you know, and then later on sometime I said, you were right, Mom. I did need to screen out more and all that. But when she was telling me that, I go, yeah, you know, just, you know, leave me alone, you know.
No, you don't know anything
Oh,
about
dang, yeah,
basketball.
yeah, right. But she knew a lot. She could have coached. She was my mother just an incredible human being. I've never known anybody quite like her.
There are built-in number one fans.
And she just had all, and she could cook. Oh my goodness, and stuff. And she was respected in the community. Played for the church choir. Both of my parents were piano players, good piano players. My dad, that's how he made a living. Not a real grand living, but he he was what every artist wants to do. You know, he made what he made, piano. He would play in Tucson and Phoenix and Douglas, Arizona, and Albuquerque, New Mexico, and El Paso, Texas. I call them like in a dive bar kind of honky tonk kind of places, you know, and he get his little money and then go to some other town, played in Mexico. Um, he was in my life. He was kind of irresponsible man, but he loved me and I loved him. He didn't give much to my support, and people would say to my mother, "Well, you know, you could sue him for this and that." And she said, "Look, just having that man out of my life is enough for me." She said, "If I'd be suing him and stuff, I'd have to be dealing with him all the time, you know." But he just floated through life. I never knew when he was going to be around. I'd be playing with my friends, and I'd look down the street, and it was almost like a scene in a movie. I'd see, you know, maybe about 6 blocks away, and he had this walk, and I'd go, "That looks like that's my dad," you know. And I called him Mac, you know, and I'd go running and stuff, and he'd give me and my buddies $2 or $3, which, you know, say like around 1949 or something. You got $3 in your pocket. Whew, you marching in high cotton. I mean, it was like, whoa. But he just didn't have that sense of responsibility. I was a parent young, high school sweetheart, got pregnant and all that, but I took that stuff serious. And I worked all kind of odd jobs and stuff. He didn't have that kind of like, oh, I got a son, and I have a half brother that he never even knew, but I met later on. You know, so that's just the kind of guy he was. He wasn't hateful. I remember being at his house one time, and a bill collector came and said, "Mr. McCray, you know, I hate to bother you, but you know, you owe us money, and I don't want to have to take you to court." And my dad just calmly said, he said, "I don't have the money," and then just quietly closed the door. He didn't curse the guy or get all mad or anything. I never saw my dad mad. He never reprimanded me once. So that's kind of dad he was. And my mother, my mother was she's like a reprimanding machine sometimes, you know, trying to, you know, make sure that I grew up right. And he just let it fly. That dude could play a piano. Whoa.
Would you say that's kind of where you get your more artistic side from?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah. And from my mother. But I've just always um, performed like, you know, all through school. If there was when I was in school, school was so, I don't want to use the term boring because I'm not a person who's bored much, but it didn't have a lot, you know, and so I belonged to everything. I was in the choir, I helped in the office, I helped the janitor, I helped in the cafeteria because I found when you did all these things, somebody always needed you. You know, they come to the classroom, and I went by my middle name, Charles, and I could hear them talking to the teacher. Could I borrow Charles for a minute? You know, we've got a problem down there. And she said, Charles, would you go with Mr. Miller to the janitor? And I, whoosh, man, I was out of there. You know, it's like whoa. And I'd be looking in the in the door, little windows at the classroom. You know, hey, everybody, you know. It was my schooling was, and I'm definitely not knocking those black teachers. I went to all black school up through the 7th grade. You know, they were doing what they had to do, but hardly any of them were interesting. You know, it was a lot of read chapter 8 and answer the questions at the end of the chapter. You know, and it's like, give me something. And I remember in kindergarten, one of my problems, you know, I was telling you about when I decided I was going to teach. When I went to kindergarten, I already knew how to read, but yet they taught everybody reading at the same time. You know, so they going, ba, ka, and having kids go to the sign. And I just wanted somebody give me a book to read, you know what I mean? And then we had that Dick and James C Spot run. I just threw that stuff.
I feel that so much because I'd say I'm the kind of learner, like, if I can figure it out on my own, like, I can read on my own time, like, teach me, like, I have to be here, like, my parents are making me be here, so let's have some form of, some
Yeah,
communication.
especially like in history. You know, when I taught social studies and stuff in my class, and we'd be just discussing, say, Ben Franklin and something he did, or Lewis Clark expedition. I would sometimes we would improvise. Okay, let's pretend you're on the boat and you're out there and you're trying to discover this land and all that, and then there's a something happens and there's a leak on the boat. What would you do? You know, then the people get into to me that's more exciting than uh, what date something happened. You know, what does 1613 mean to an 11-year-old, you know, in and of itself? But if you took 1613 and say, well, at that time, just imagine a life where you didn't have a washing machine and a refrigerator and all that, you know, so kids can get a picture of what you're doing. And and I and like you say, you remember select teachers. My 4th grade teacher, Josie Daniels, I was so in love with her. She was just absolutely beautiful and one of the best teachers. We used to have radio quiz shows, competitions between the schools back then. And she was the coach of our team. Um, and we'd study after school and we'd win these competitions. And to me, that got rid of that whole thing about uh, Negroes, as we refer to them, and colored people are dumb, you know, because we were beating these white kids and stuff. And I remember when she got married, I was so jealous, and I would I'm 9 years old. I wanted to fight. Cress Lander was the guy that married her, and then I had this wonderful teacher at high school. My senior year, English teacher. She was the first English teacher in all my schooling that had us write interesting things other than why I'm proud to be an American or something like that. You know, she would just, what if you woke up the next day a member of the opposite sex? You know, I'd just be writing away. And then she'd ask us to read the newspaper. I want you to know all that's going on in town. And then I want you to write an expose over of the mayor or the sheriff or somebody based on something you read. You know, I couldn't wait to go to her class and here again I had a crush on her. Of course it's a little different now. You know, I'm a 17 or 18-year-old, you know, and she was just 4 years out of college. So I thought I had a chance. You know? But she looked at me, you know, she was just such a great human being. She knew what that was all about, and I never said anything or got out of line, but she could she could tell. And she said, Ernest, you know, shame on you. But she would respond to my writing rather than a grade and a bunch of red writing about errors I'd made. She would she would uh she would respond by writing almost sometimes as much as I wrote to get a point over, and I remember her telling me, she said, you ought to write a book someday, and I wanted to flunk high school just to spend another year with her, that rare that rare teacher. And all my schooling never had one good history teacher, not one. And history is a class that you could just be so creative in teaching. Didn't have one, not at college level. Uh, had a great college teacher. Uh, I was a PE an elementary teacher major, and he was so excited about science. And then I just certain that's what teachers need to be. Uh, when Sputnik and the first exploration and orbiting the Earth came, we watched it on TV and stuff, and he was just so beside himself with joy, for things like that. And then I learned a lot from him. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go in the classroom, and if you're not excited about learning, how you expect
Someone else to
someone
be,
else? Yeah,
especially a 6-year-old or a teenager who's like all they're
yeah,
focused on is hanging out with their friends and like keeping up with all the cool kids.
that's right.
I play this little game with all my guests, and I'm gonna say a word, and you
Hmm.
just gotta tell us the first thing that comes to your mind, okay?
Okay.
So, first word is basketball.
A big part of my life, a joy in my life, something that I don't do anymore, but one of my big joys in life was playing what I call one on none, just going out to a basketball court by myself and shooting. And I would try to rebound a missed shot before it hit the ground. And then wherever I catch the ball, I would either take off, drive from there, or shoot from there.
Wow, that's that's cool. It's like wall ball, but like better.
Yeah.
YMCA.
Oh boy, I'm a YMCA rat. I lived in the Tucson YMCA. My mother wasn't an outdoors person, but I learned camping and the joy of hiking at the YMCA. We'd go on these backpacking trips and stuff, and I almost said I learned to swim in the Y. I didn't learn to swim. I had already could swim, but I improved a lot of my swimming in the Y. And I learned how to stand up for myself at the Y. There was a man that ran the Tucson Y named Chick Hawkins, and he used to call us black kids 8-ball. And he really was a nice guy. He wasn't a hateful kind of guy, but that was just his little racist thing, that he didn't know what he was doing. And I got up the nerves one day to say, I really wish you wouldn't call me 8-ball. My name is Charles. And he said something like, I'm sorry. And he never, I don't know if he stopped calling all black kids 8-ball, but he stopped calling
Colin.
me that.
Yeah. Rapping Ernie.
Oh, rapping Ernie. Uh, I used to have a class called Rapping with Ernie at a alternative school I started, and we covered everything in that, and kids could get points. They could get credits in social studies or English and different things, depending on what they wanted to do.
Did you think, that was something you really kind of helped them in a way, especially since it was an alternative school?
Hmm. Yeah, it was the greatest experience I had in my life running that. I was the first principal of the school and started it.
That is really nice to hear. And I like how you really made education fun for them. Thank you for coming up here. It's been so fun to have you. This has been awesome.
Oh, I feel the same way, Ashley. Thank you for having me on.
Be safe, have fun, and don't be afraid to join the convo.